There's this phase that many people go through on the path to enlightenment where they become convinced that there's a particular way that it must look to be enlightened. And so they'll hyper examine the actions of other people who they think are enlightened, and they think that that's behavior that they must mimic in order to be enlightened themselves, or at least to look enlightened. And so they'll fixate on the most subtle things, like how an enlightened person ties their shoes. They think that there is something special in the way that they do it. There's something more graceful and equanimous about something as subtle as just tying your shoes. There might be some truth to that, but it isn't through anything exclusively. It's all inclusive. So enlightenment itself doesn't have to present in any particular way. There isn't really a likeness to enlightenment at all. It's so all-inclusive, there isn't a single thing that you could point out and say, this is it. This is what it looks like to be an enlightened person. So if you're going through that phase now, if you're thinking, you did something that an enlightened person wouldn't do, and therefore you're disqualified from being enlightened, that's an assumption that you're making about enlightenment, which I would suggest isn't really true. Enlightenment is being fully and completely with whatever is here and now, without excluding anything. Ironically, it's through this conviction that there's a likeness to enlightenment, and therefore other things that must be excluded. That conviction itself is obfuscating the enlightenment that already is. Really, there's always enlightenment. Enlightenment is just a self-illumination of anything that's appearing. It's always here. It's just that you either recognize it or you don't. And there's ultimately no difference between the two. It's just maybe a bit nicer to recognize it. So you can recognize the all-togetherness of everything, the wholeness, the completeness, and you can embrace that as it is without pushing anything away. And there's an easefulness to that. And you stop worrying so much about looking enlightened or doing something the right way or the wrong way. And even if that does happen from time to time, you don't beat yourself up over it. You include that as well. So there's just this overall lightheartedness to recognizing the enlightenment that always is, this self-illumination of phenomena. Notice how that never goes away. Even in sleep, you're aware that there's not an experience whenever you wake up. There's always this stillness, which just is. There's nothing more I can say about it. It simply is. And if you don't recognize that, if you go through these phases where you overlook it, it's also that. So there's no real difference.